The Pico, not Neo, 4, because this year, for some reason, Pico decided to drop the Neo. This is a device I had so many hopes for when it was first announced. It looked and sounded like it could finally be a true Quest competitor, and in many ways, it is, but there are some things stopping me from calling this the true Quest 2 killer that a lot of people were hoping for when it was first announced. I've had this device for about 2 months now, which is more than enough time for it to go through all its updates and for me to see what truly makes it tick, as well as of course forming my own thoughts and opinions on it. However, before we begin, I do need to mention that this device was sent to me by Pico. They did not stop me from saying anything in this video, and they did not get a prior review of this video, so all thoughts and opinions are entirely my own. The first time they're seeing this video is right now. So here we go. I'm Mysticle, and this is my review of the Pico 4. First off, let's talk a little bit about the company, since I don't think we can talk about this headset without first talking about the giant behind it. Pico, as a company, has existed since March of 2015, and released its first headset, the Pico VR Goblin, in 2016. In 2021, however, a big change would come across in the company, as it was acquired by Chinese internet giant ByteDance. ByteDance is absolutely massive, owning huge companies such as TikTok, and being worth over $300 billion. So I don't think I need to tell you how their funding would massively help Pico in moving to more markets. Things were not all good, however, as ByteDance, just like Facebook, had its own set of glaring problems and questionable business practices. For the first few years of its inception, Pico had focused solely on the Chinese market, creating headsets that were unavailable to us in the West. Of course, you could get them delivered here and they would work just fine, but you would need to somehow import them first. Last year, however, Pico released its first headset to the West, the Pico Neo 3 Link. This was a slightly modified version of their Pico Neo 3 that was available to us in the West. And then this year, they released the Pico 4 to the European market. However, not the US market, which still baffles me. Even though Pico decided not to sell its headsets in the US, you can still import them there as well, and they will work just fine. It's just really weird to me that Pico decided to sell only in the EU and completely ignore the massive market that is the US. This could be because Pico was trying to sell to the markets that Meta had less of a grip on. Germany, for example, at the time, still had the Quest unofficially banned from sales in the country. Okay, now with a bit of the backstory behind us, let's move on to the elephant in the room, or more like the ant in the room, as this thing is absolutely tiny. Here it is compared to the Quest 2, and you can see it really is quite slim, especially when you take off that magnetic faceplate. This is something you instantly feel when you put it on. The balance is also much better, as the battery, by default, is in the back of the head strap, making the weight balance feel much better right out of the box. That magnetic face gasket feels just as bad, if not worse, than the Quest 2 one. It's just very firm, doesn't mold to your face very well, and feels more like one of those rough carpets than something you would want to wear on your face for a long time. The head strap itself feels very nice and sturdy, and could be compared to the Elite head strap. That being said, it hasn't snapped on me yet. The volume buttons have been moved onto the head strap itself, which isn't the most comfortable place ever, but you get used to it. With the power button being left on the body of the headset, we also have a Type-C port for charging, but no 3.5mm headphone jack. In the front, you have the 4 cameras used for tracking the headset and the super glossy faceplate, which will 100% undoubtedly garner all of your fingerprints. Behind this faceplate, we have the 16-megapixel color camera used for color pass-through and AR capabilities, which is a major selling point of this headset compared to the Quest 2. Now, what we haven't mentioned yet is the controllers. They're actually really nice. Nothing special, but they are slightly different than the Quest 2, which is a breath of fresh air when all the other companies are basically copying that 1:1, as that's the Qualcomm reference design. They feel good in the hands, take AA replaceable batteries, and have decent haptic feedback. They don't have full finger tracking, but what they do have is dedicated photo and video recording buttons, which come in super handy. But I do sometimes press those on accident when actually trying to hit the action buttons. It's, again, something you just need to get used to. Now let's talk about the most important part of the headset, the lenses. These are pancake lenses. As you can see, compared to the Quest 2's Fresnel lenses, these have no ridges or rings, providing you with a super clear image of the LCD panels behind it. This is instantly noticeable when you put on the headset. Glare is greatly reduced and clarity is improved. That extra clarity is also thanks to those LCD panels, which most would say are equally as important as the lenses themselves. These give you a resolution of 2160 by 2160 per eye, which is an upgrade that is instantly noticeable compared to the Quest 2's 1832 by 1920 per eye. The Quest 2 does, however, have a higher refresh rate, being able to run its panels at 120Hz, while the Pico 4 can only run its panels at 90Hz. The Pico 4 also has motorized IPD adjustment, meaning you can get that perfect IPD and sweet spot within the software, and the lenses will move perfectly to that IPD you set using those motorized lenses. No presets like we had in the Quest 2, where you couldn't get that IPD and sweet spot just right. Both of the headsets are running the same Snapdragon XR2 as their main CPU, with the Pico 4 having a slight performance advantage with better cooling and more RAM, with it having 8GB over the Quest 2's 6GB. So all that, bar maybe the refresh rate, sounds pretty damn good on paper. However, you can have really good hardware, but if you don't pair it with good software, it doesn't mean anything. So how does the Pico 4 fare in that regard? Well, it's complicated. First off, let's begin with the fact that you don't need any TikTok or any account except for a Pico account to set up the device. You don't even need a phone, even though there is a phone app, but we don't really talk about it. It's there and you can use it, but it's unnecessary. That's a pretty big plus. The Pico 4 is running what I would call a MIUI version of the Quest software. What that basically means is it's an overly colorful and cartoony version of the software. If you've ever had a phone that runs MIUI, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Other than that, the softwares are really quite similar, but this isn't necessarily a bad thing. The software had some glaring issues at the beginning, lag, glitches, and other things like that. However, it's gone through many updates since then, and now it's perfectly usable. That, and with it looking very similar to a phone UI, it's very easy to navigate and find what you might need. The Pico 4's software also allows you to install APKs right out of the box. By default, no need for a computer or a phone, no need to enable developer options or anything like that. You can do that right from within the headset's browser, which is quite nice. I've also found the advertised 3-hour battery in standalone mode to be roughly right. However, sometimes it's closer to 2.5 hours. The Pico 4 also, just like the Quest, allows you to cast to your TV and other devices to share the game you are playing with whoever is watching. This worked quite well in my tests. You can also make use of the Pico 4's hand tracking, which is there, but that's about it, to be completely honest. It's nowhere near as good to the Quest hand tracking, and won't blow you away by any means. But it's there, and it does work. It's a nice to have. So overall, I must say the user experience worked quite well for me, and I'm glad that I'm able to write this review after the Pico 4 has gone through its updates. They even have that feature from the Quest where you can double tap the side of the headset in order to enable pass-through. Talking about pass-through, I don't think it's something we can gloss over. The pass-through on this thing is genuinely nice. It uses the one-front RGB camera though, which means it's not stereoscopic, meaning it won't be depth correct. So if you try to bring anything too close to that camera while in pass-through, it's going to feel really weird and just not right. I had no problem walking around the house with it on though, and being able to see everything in color was absolutely fantastic. It's a completely different experience and just feels like true AR. The pass-through was also sharp enough to where if I looked at the right angle, I could read things on my phone. Pico did also release a recent software update that allows developers to implement the pass-through into their apps and essentially use it as AR, just like we can on the Quest. And you can see this running in the demo of OpenBrush above me right now. I will have to say that this is definitely the best pass-through mode I've used on a VR headset this far. But now, onto the glaring problem with the device. The content. This is, of course, a standalone device, and this is where my main issue with it lies. While the standalone app library is constantly growing, it is nowhere near as large as the Quest 2. This is understandable. They have not been in the European market for half as long as the Quest has. So of course, they will be behind on titles. That isn't to say they don't have some great ones on there. They do. They have games such as Demeo, Blade and Sorcery, 11 Table Tennis, Hyperdash, After the Fall, Contractors, and they're constantly adding more. They've got even larger titles planned, such as The Walking Dead coming soon. That being said, these versions aren't exactly always the same as they are on the Quest. For example, Demeo is not cross-compatible with any of the other versions, which I learned the hard way. That being said, the Pico does have that performance boost over the Quest, which is definitely noticeable in some apps that are taking advantage of it, such as Red Matter. So let's move on to where I think this headset really shines. PCVR. And if you're planning to do this, you've got two options: wireless or wired. Now, the wired option is going through USB Type-C, just like it is on the Quest 2, as Pico has for whatever reason decided to drop the DisplayPort capabilities found in the Pico Neo 3 link. So I much more prefer wireless. For wireless, you've got two options. You can either use Pico's built-in streaming software, which you get for free, and it does work, or you can use Virtual Desktop. Pico streaming software actually worked perfectly fine for me, but it would choose all the settings like bitrate and visuals, seemingly prioritizing performance, so visuals would sometimes drop, not giving me too much control over it. Virtual desktop on the Pico 4 works perfectly fine though, and it is my preferred way of using wireless PCVR. Virtual desktop gives me all the settings I might want to tweak when using the Pico 4 for wireless, and that is where I think this headset really shows its true colors. Those lenses and resolution, coupled with the high settings on PCVR titles, really makes things pop. Okay, so here's the thing. The Pico 4 clearly has some great upsides over the Quest 2, especially in the hardware department. And with their price tags being so similar, you might be pushed to buy the Pico 4 over the Quest 2, or even think of upgrading. So what do I think? To me, it definitely depends on what you want to do with it. If you already have a Quest 2 and are using it for standalone gaming, I would say you probably shouldn't upgrade. You'll lose your games catalog as they are not cross-compatible, and not only will you have to rebuy all your games, half of them won't even be available yet. If you're using the Quest 2 for PCVR gaming and are thinking of upgrading, that's a different story. It's not going to be an insane upgrade. You will lose your 120Hz, but what you will gain is a higher resolution and pancake lenses. So to each their own, I guess. However, if you are looking for a wireless PCVR headset and are trying to decide between the Pico 4 and the Quest 2, and you know that you are going to be using the headset solely for PCVR, I would say you should seriously consider the Pico 4. It's lighter, smaller, and more comfortable right out of the box. And then on top of that, you get the better visuals and the better lenses, as well as proper IPD adjustment. So that is going to be it for today's video. Thank you all so much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this one. This one was actually a scripted video. I don't script my videos a lot, but when I do reviews, I want to get them just right. So yeah, I don't have a teleprompter, so I apologize if you saw me looking slightly in that direction a little bit. That's where my laptop is, but I wanted to get this one just right. And hopefully when I get the new studio, things are going to be brought up a notch. But anyway, if you guys like this one, leave a like. If you disliked it, I guess this button works too. Join the Discord, join the Reddit. Much love to the Patreons, and see you in the next one. Peace.